Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start my presentation by covering what I'm going to cover. So no slides from me. You'll probably be delighted to hear. So I'm going to just play to the theme of this presentation around whether the automotive industry is in the slow lane. By going from slow lanes to sea lanes. I'll talk about the context of the industry, some of the specific intra-sector issues, then look to the outside world and some of the external factors that are influencing the shape of the industry. I'll talk about the role of technology and digitalization in particular, and then I'll come to a conclusion with what's happening now in the sector and summarize where we're up to. By all means, ask any questions you'd like to ask as I go through. So just to put some context on the UK marine and maritime sector, collectively, the sector contributes £46 billion annually to the British economy and employs just over 1 million people. And it might surprise some of you to know that over 95% of all of the goods that are traded in the UK come or go by sea. So it's a sector that has a surprising amount of importance in our everyday lives, but also to our economy overall. And clearly, because we're a sector that goes in and out of ports and works all around the world, this is an industry that is international by design. So when we think about competition and collaboration, we don't just think about our own shores, we have to, by design, think about what goes on overseas and the fact that we trade overseas all the time. The sector has huge diversity in scope, and I'll talk a little about the advantages and disadvantages of that shortly. Literally, the marine and maritime sector covers everything from ports and harbours to cargo ships, to law, to finance, to insurance, super yachts and warships. So you can probably imagine that with that comes actually some really interesting challenges for the sector overall. And by default, when you just think about what we do as a sector, we are totally dependent on both technology and also on people. So thinking then about some intra-sector issues, the first is really around the fact that most of the sector operates in a relatively low margin environment. And therefore, finding and sustaining competitive advantage is quite difficult, and articulating the need to invest when actually you are operating in such a low margin environment is quite a difficult challenge. Furthermore, because of the diversity of the sector, as I've just mentioned, there is a real lack of common interest, and that really does act as a barrier to collaborative investment and a barrier to collaboration. If you think about ships in particular, but also some of the infrastructure that support them, the life cycles for designing and acquiring and through life support are very, very long indeed. Possibly, I'm reflecting, much longer than that of the automotive sector. So, I mean, the average warship, for example, is expected to have a life of over 30 years. Most cargo ships are expected to have a life of over 50 years. So that drives quite an agricultural approach to design and investment, simply because the risk of managing obsolescence through life becomes a real challenge, and the constant need to rip out and replace particularly electronic equipment becomes a real barrier to investment. Well invested areas then tend to be related to compliance, and in particular safety and training are great examples of areas where the sector has invested considerably, and in many respects is world leading in the UK. We train mariners from all over the world, and our safety standards are recognised internationally and adopted by many other nations. So now if I think about the external world we operate in, I don't think anyone could talk with certainty at the moment about our economic future, either in the UK or internationally at this point. But if I just reflect on some of the recent developments from a UK perspective, the uncertainty that existed pre-coronavirus around Brexit and how the nature of European and then global trade would work, Other initiatives such as America First and Chinese Belt and Road all combine to present a future for us which is relatively uncertain. Add on top of that the economic impact of coronavirus, and actually our future looks pretty uncertain. That said, the OECD published a report last year that estimated the value of the global ocean economy to be $3 trillion by 2030, which is almost double that which exists today. So assuming that the coronavirus impacts are either homogenized globally, or that in some way we can take advantage of the opportunity that exists there, and that there is a doubling of the global ocean economy. Clearly, there is both threat and opportunity presented there. The environment also presents a significant opportunity and threat for us. And from a UK lens, the desire to achieve net zero and the International Maritime Organisation's stated aim to achieve a 50% reduction in gaseous emissions from ships and the marine industry by 2050 presents a very real issue for us all to have to face. Whilst ton for ton, transporting goods by sea is actually the most effective way of doing it, particularly in comparison with aviation, but actually ton for ton, it is the most environmentally efficient means of transport. It does not let us off the hook remotely. We have relatively agricultural equipment installed on board ships and for propulsion, and so checking what's available in other sectors and working out where that can be applied in marine and maritime is particularly important to us. The other thing we can't avoid, I said earlier that we have a high dependence on people and technology in marine and maritime, and people and future skills and future workforce are hugely important. I think it was Neville who was talking about his son locking himself in his bedroom, and bear in mind that trying to attract a generation of people who've grown up with huge internet connectivity, a considerable array of digital and media devices available to them in everyday life. Asking those individuals to go and spend their lives out at sea, living on a ship where connectivity is a constant challenge, it is very challenging now. That's a situation that will not improve. And so we need to find ways in the marine and maritime sector to either take people out of the loop, so our dependence on people at sea is not as great, or find ways of making the at-sea experience just like it is at home, if not better, because taking people away from their families is bad enough. Taking them away from their tech seems unbelievably difficult. And of course, in amongst all of this, we have the sector's response to the exponential rate of technological change. And this leads me on to how our future maritime world could look in a fourth industrial revolution world. So imagine then that we now are in a time where we have smart ships that exploit advanced navigation and communications technologies, have onboard sensors and intelligent systems, and use lightly manned, semi-autonomous and in time fully autonomous capabilities. These ships then operate seamlessly with digital interconnected ports, which use digitally tagged containers, autonomous trucks and remotely operated cranes to completely take humans out of the loop, drive up productivity and efficiency at the dockside when the ships arrive. Logistics and asset data from many and disparate sources is then handled using technologies such as blockchain to quickly and securely and accurately connect owners, operators, hauliers, traders, insurers, supply chains, and potentially the consumers with real-time information about all of their products and services. Fully realised, then, this will create an innovative, connected trading ecosystem, transforming the maritime world that we know today. For example, if we can transform the speed and productivity of shipping and port operations, it could potentially drive a change to the types of goods and services that are traded by sea today, and the expectation of pace that would go along with that. And the adoption of technology-enabled security enhancements dealing with cyber and piracy threats will, I think, increasingly influence consumer choice about where trade takes place in the world, potentially signalling a competitive advantage for the UK. So I'm sure for many of the people who've signed into this call, you can probably envisage that future. But if anyone's sitting there thinking, well, I can sort of picture a port on a ship and I'm not sure I can see how you get there from here, most of the things I've just mentioned are already in trial right now in parts of the world, or are already being exploited today. So advanced digital technology will transform maritime operations, and instead of using that technology just to drive down cost, which is often a euphemism for reducing the number of people employed, there is an opportunity, I believe, connected to my previous statement about how you attract people into the sector who are talented and want to stay. There's an opportunity to get a strategic edge here through the well-considered integration of people and technology. If we can take people out of the loop where safety and drudgery can be overcome by technology and instead deliver role augmentation and human systems partnerships, we can enhance both performance and productivity and make the sector an incredibly exciting and attractive place to come and work. This will need highly trained, committed, motivated people, or we simply won't achieve the competitive edge that the UK is going to need in the maritime sector. In the war for talent, we know we must up the image of the sector so that we literally don't miss the boat. So in terms of what's happening now and what we're looking towards in the future, in the UK, there is now a greater level of collaboration around the marine and maritime sector than there ever has been before. Just over 3 years ago, with government support, an organisation called Maritime UK was established, essentially a collaborative effort from industry, trade bodies, and BEIS and Department for Transport in particular, to come together to champion the cause of the marine and maritime sector, to essentially coalesce and cohere a very complex and diverse sector and provide a unified voice. We recognise the scale of both the opportunity and the threat that's posed by global economic trade, increasingly nationalistic agendas, and in particular you can see this evolving through the coronavirus responses, economic opportunity and threat, and essentially we know that we need to change and we need to do it fast. The UK government in January 2019 published a report called Maritime 2050. That report, importantly, although it came from the government, was contributed to by the sector, by industry specialists, by academia. So it was a widely consulted document. For the first time, Maritime 2050 charts the course of the UK marine and maritime sector all the way out to 2030. It's ambitious, and much of the report talks about technology and the level of investment that's needed to retain and achieve a competitive edge for the UK marine sector. Neville mentioned earlier the Brunel challenge, and it's something I've personally been involved in and very excited about realising, mostly because I see huge potential for the marine and maritime sector reaching out and accelerating its development of technology by learning from others. I also see potential for the marine and maritime sector to lean out and give other sectors the opportunity to learn from the things that we've invested in inside the sector. Late last year, in the marine and maritime area, we launched a consortia of industry and government alongside academia called Maritime Research and Innovation UK, or MARI UK. It's a similar business model to Brunel, and in fact it's complementary and will continue to be. Through that, we launched 2 calls to deal with the immediate technical challenges that we have as a sector. The first of those was around clean maritime technologies, to deal with the challenge I mentioned earlier around IMO compliance. And the second was around novel systems, which in particular covered the areas of autonomy, machine learning, and greater connectivity across the ports and shipping industries. I'm pleased to say that we were absolutely overwhelmed with proposals. In fact, the collective investment required, if we were able to fund all of them, was well over £150 million on a budget of about £3 million. So you can see the scale of the challenge in terms of finding the financial footing to get these things off of the ground. But the great news is the level of ambition that's come from our sector. So small to medium enterprises, people literally in their sheds submitting ideas, right up to multi-million pound companies have contributed ideas and proposals into these 2 calls. And I'm delighted with the quality of them, and we are funding as many of them as we possibly can. So it's very early days, but real progress is being made, and that strong recognition that we must change and we will change, and the ambition exists in our science, technology and engineering communities to drive that change and come up with ideas to solve the challenges that we have. So I think there was also a point made earlier, and I think this is where I would like to close my presentation, around the fact that this isn't about technology on its own. Brilliant technologies can sit on shelves and go nowhere. The real issue here is leadership and business model change and business model adaptability in order to embrace, enhance, embed and integrate different technologies into the way that we do our business. The marine and maritime sector is by default quite traditional, and implementing new technologies that either take people out of the loop or change the efficiency or the productivity is often met with quite an immune response, quite a significant back push. To really motor on this, we need to find ways of changing the way our leaders collaborate and see the benefit in collaborating. We need to have business models that can be made more agile to adopt and integrate these technologies into the way we do our business. And for the marine and maritime sector, I think that's really fundamentally what we need. We clearly have no shortage of ideas. We're overwhelmed with brilliant ideas. It's a great problem to have, but we need to find ways of making that work. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening.